Hello and welcome to Training Tuesday, where we go through regular tips and tricks to help you build a professional life you love. This week, we are talking about towards versus away from decisions when it comes to your career. And this is a concept I first learned when I was back at Essence. So we talked about towards versus away from decisions when it comes to employee motivation. And so this was something we learned all about. And this is something that I have since thought a lot about since leaving this role, because this is something I see all the time in my coaching practice. This is something that often comes up in people's careers, and that this is something that I've been hyper aware of. And essentially the concept of this is that we either make decisions towards what we do want or away from what we don't. And so when I see it in my day-to-day job now, what I see is people making decisions because they want out of a certain role. And what it tends to look like is either they're making decisions towards the job that they do want, thinking about long-term, this is what would be more fulfilling to me, this is what I want to move towards, so that's what I'm going to consciously do. Yay, that's what we want to see. Or we see people doing the thing where they're like, I don't know exactly what I want, but I know it's not this, so every choice I'm going to make is going to be moving away from this thing that I do not want, which is my job now. And this approach doesn't necessarily always work well. And so I think that's why it's a really important one to teach about today, because the analogy I tend to use is it's like being a bird trapped in a glass greenhouse, right? And it's all glass, but there's a giant door open. And the bird, because it's frantic and it just wants to escape, is running into all the glass walls, trying its best to get out of there. And there's a huge door open, and you sit there and you watch and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, the door is right there. I wish you could just slow down, or I wish I could convey to you that you need to pause a beat and you'd be able to get out just fine. But the problem is we can't convey that thing, right? And so it keeps frantically happening, and long story short, it doesn't end well. This same thing I see happen all the time with people in their careers. They get panicky, they get flustered, they want out, and so they make choices that aren't in their best long-term interest. Because maybe something like they see a bunch of red flags in an interview, but they take the new job anyways because they think, well, it's better than where I'm at now. And just spoiler alert, it never ends up that well. All the red flags you saw end up being red flags later, right? And so this is what we see when it comes to careers, is people who are making away from decisions, not the best long-term. And so this week, my tip for you is to start to differentiate between these motivations, right? Which of your career choices up until now have been towards what you do want, and which choices have been away from what you don't want. And I want you to think about that and start taking inventory, right? Because if you are feeling that you have had some away from motivation when it comes to your career, what I do with clients is we do a triage approach. So if you're in this place where you're like, I just need to get out, that's when we say, okay, let's stop the bleeding first. Let's work on either getting some sort of stepping stone job so that we can have something that kind of takes the sting out of it so we can think about ourselves long-term and make better decisions. Or let's see if we can reframe or shift some of the things in our current role so we can feel better about it, so that we can then start to continue thinking about long-term choices opposed to short-term, let me get out of here stuff, right? So that's what we would do, is take a triage approach. And so you can begin with doing that, but what you need to do first is be aware of if you are making any of these away from choices. So that is my sole thing for you this week, is to take inventory, ask yourself which of your decisions have been towards and which have been away from, right? Because I know it's really challenging, it's really compelling. This has happened for most people. And so start there, start with the taking inventory. Give me a thumbs up if you have ever made some sort of away from decision in your career. For speaking for myself, I know. And know that I'm here to help you focus on the long-term stuff, okay? On the towards decisions. But that's my tip for you this week. Start with seeing what you're moving away from. And in the meantime, happy working.